a lot of people had pretty bad winter losses, and I did not. But the reason I didn't is because I treated for mites. I tested after I treated again, I tested, I treated again, I tested. And I actually treated 5 times last year because in my follow up testing, my mite levels were always still high, like about what they were before I treated. And I talked to a lot of beekeepers, and a lot of other people had the same experience. So people that did not do a follow up alcohol wash after the treatment would not have known that they still had a high mite load. I think, last year was like, it's like, I think about chipmunks. You know how some years you've got, my cat brings in a chipmunk every day. There are just, and every time I walk out into my yard, there are a million chipmunks out there. And, they're scurrying in all directions. They're getting into my garden. They're everywhere. And some years there are hardly any chipmunks. Some years the oak trees produce copious quantities of acorns, and the bears are very happy. Other years, the bears are breaking down my electric fences because there's no acorns for them to eat. So I think last year was a bumper Varroa year. So if you were a Varroa mite last year, it was a great year for you, like a great chipmunk year, and a bad year for us as beekeepers and honeybees. So why did I have only 2% losses last year? It's because I was anal about testing and treating for Varroa. Like really, 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 I went crazy with the Varroa. So Charlie wanted me to mention that, and I did. Yeah, Joe says he did back-to-back treatments, and that's what I did too. I had to, just because the treatments were not knocking down the mites the way they should have. So, okay, should we get started on this? This is a fun topic. I really enjoyed making this. All right, Justin, how do I go? What should I do?
There you go.
Okay, thank you. All right,
Anytime.
can I get rid of myself?
If you turn off your video, you can get rid of yourself.
Do I want to get rid of myself? I can put myself over in the corner. How's that?
That's a very personal question.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to go ahead and start. This way, if people want to see me cracking up or something, they can. Because I do tend to do that. All right. We're going to talk about comb honey. And I have to tell you guys, this is not actually a beginner topic. So, for those of you who are listening here who have less than about 3 or 4 years experience, just kind of listen, take it under advisement, and figure that this is something that you'll probably be working up to, because it does require a fair amount of skill and experience. But why do it? Okay. I love producing comb honey. It's delicious. Number one, I have quite a market for it. There are a lot of people who are constantly asking me for comb honey, and they will pay a premium price for it. I don't even charge all that much. I charge like $15 for a 12-ounce container. But you don't need a lot of equipment to produce it. No uncapping tank, no extractor, filters, forks, hot knives, nothing like that. Okay. It's really, really profitable. So a medium super of extracted honey, figure 35 pounds at $10 a pound, is you're going to make $350 off of that super. The same medium, if it's comb honey and chunk honey, is worth $900. So you can make a lot of money on comb honey. And there's my comb honey. So how does it differ from extracted honey? The foundation is different. Okay, it's thin surplus foundation. There are no wires, which means it's pure beeswax that goes into the frame. It's very thin. There can't be any wires because obviously your customer doesn't want to eat wires. By the way, Grant sells this. He sells all of the equipment that is needed for making comb honey. I talked to him before I logged on here, and he was on his way bringing nukes up to Northeast, and mentioned to me that I have to be sure to tell you guys that he has all the supplies for producing comb honey. So comb honey requires thin surplus foundation. That's what we call it. Very strong colonies, because remember, they're drawing out foundation, and you need a good strong colony to do that. You need some decent nectar flows, so strong nectar flows. And for us in this area, that means spring flows. And you generally freeze comb honey. There's a little pest that we never really see, Braulasica. It's called the bee louse, and it'll destroy your comb honey. So, and it'll track stuff all over the place. It's kind of gross. So you got to freeze that before sale. And of course, there's always, issues with small hive beetle, wax moth, that type of thing too. Extracted honey, of course, wired wax foundation or plastic foundation. You can get decent extracted honey with colonies of average or decent good strength, but you don't have to have, booming colonies. Any strength flows throughout the season, and you don't have to freeze it. So, they do differ. They differ in these respects. And Justin, are you going to keep an eye on the chat over there so people are asking questions? You can.
I can if you'd like.
Yes, please, because I can't do it. I can't.
No
talk
worries.
and read at the same time. Okay, so there are three basic types of comb honey. Basswood sections, Ross rounds, and cut comb honey, which obviously is what I produce. And I think it's the easiest one. So we'll talk about each of these just so you know what they're about. And we can't forget chunk honey. Chunk honey is comb honey in a jar with extracted honey. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. You get some liquid honey for your tea, and you've also got comb honey in there. So the very earliest design was basswood sections. And if you look in beekeeping journals 100 years ago, this is what they would be talking about. So there's this rim, right? You special supers, you have to have these basswood strips that go in there. You can see even this is good, but you can see that the edges are not filled in. So it's not really all that pretty. The corners don't get filled in. But this was the original comb honey section. Then they developed Ross rounds, and that was an improvement because it was round. There weren't any corners or edges, and the bees were able to, fill in the entire piece. You still need a special box, right? Special equipment and, these rim things and foundation that goes in there. This uses thin surplus foundation, as do the basswood sections. But, it's still kind of a pain in the neck to produce. A friend of mine, actually the Carpenters, Ben and Kim Carpenter up in New York State, they're also master beekeepers, EAS master beekeepers. They bought Ross rounds, so they own that now. And then the last one is cut comb. So I like cut comb honey because it doesn't require any special equipment. You don't need a special super. You don't need basswood strips or special round, frames. you can just use a regular, medium, or shallow super, whatever you want. You do have to have frames that have a slotted top bar, but that's not actually all that uncommon anymore, because I think plastic foundation takes a slotted top bar or can. But you can reuse those frames. So you buy, a couple of sets of them, and you'll have them forever. And the only other special thing you need is the thin surplus beeswax foundation, and you need that every year, a new piece. Where did I go here? Whoop.
Looks like you shut off your video.
Instead of pushing, I'm always doing things like this. It's just, okay, there we go. So in winter, when you've got a little extra time on your hands, which of course I didn't get around to doing this year. So I still have to provision my my foundations. I have to put my foundation in the comb honey supers, but you can do that in winter if you've got a little bit of extra time. You're going to put the supers on very strong colonies that don't swarm, and that's the key here, is that it can't swarm, and you do it right before the strongest spring flows. As soon as the honey is capped, you're going to harvest that box, you freeze the frames, and then you cut it up and you package it. This is my cutting setup. Some beekeepers package it and then freeze it, but whichever way you do it, you do have to freeze it. So you buy the thin surplus foundation, and if you're using a shallow super, you're going to get 4 cut comb sections per frame. If you use a medium, so that's what you'll get if you use shallow. If you use a medium super like I do, you'll also get this nice little strip down at the bottom, which goes into my chunk honey jars. And you have to have the special frames. So putting the foundation in is a little tricky because thin surplus foundation is thinner than regular beeswax foundation, and it's quite delicate. You don't want to do it if it's at all cold. Just like regular beeswax foundation, it gets very brittle if it's cold, and it'll break. So make sure that it's, you're inside, it's warm before you put it in the frame. You actually don't want the foundation to extend all the way to the bottom of the frame, because it can bend, and then you've got the comb, bending out of the frame, and it won't fit in the package nicely, and it's kind of a pain in the neck. And another issue is that when the weather's really hot, the foundation will slip right out of the frame. So it took me a little while to figure out how to attach it securely enough so that that doesn't happen. And the last thing you've got to remember is that the hive has to be level, because if the hive isn't level, the comb will be made at an angle. Okay, so if the hive is tilted this way, you get the comb at an angle to the frame, and then that's a pain in the neck to deal with too. So there's kind of a lot of little details you've got to be mindful of. But if you get them all right, it's a fun thing. I have to mention that Mike Palmer has an excellent YouTube video on producing comb honey. And a bunch of the things that I do, I learned by watching that video. So it's because of him that I don't, extend the foundation all the way down to the bottom of the frame. And I'm going to show you how to put the foundation in the frame. At least I'm going to show you how I do it. I've got a couple of different ways of doing it. So the first thing you've got to do is you have to make a jig, like this little guy down here. And there's Indiana Bones, and he is posing next to my comb honey foundation jig. So this is a piece of oak. You don't want pine. You don't want anything soft. You need a hardwood because you're going to put it under some stress. And right here in the middle are two 1.5-inch long sheetrock screws that I put in the center 1/4 of an inch apart. And then there's these shims on the ends that are going to hold, keep the frame above the foundation. You'll see. We're gonna show you a movie on how to do this. So there's the screws in the middle. Mike says that he actually files the inside of these screws down. I tried doing that a little bit. I probably just took off the rough edges, but I don't think you need to file them completely down. You really have to use oak because pine is too soft, and after like 1 or 2 sheets of foundation, it'll bend. I tried it first with pine. It didn't work. I was being lazy, and it was a bad idea. Your shims want to be just a little bit wider than the foundation, but not as wide as the frame, because the end bars of the frame will sit on those shims. You'll see in the movie. Okay, so this is how the frame goes, right? You can see that this frame is upside down, so the ears are here, okay, sitting on the shims, and that's the top bar there, okay? So, and you've got the screws right in the slot of the top bar. So when you rotate, you're going to rotate the frame 90 degrees, and that, see, it's apart here so that you can get the foundation in there in between those 2 screws. And then once you pull it up and rotate it, it'll snap shut. You'll see. It's hard to describe in words. But right, we're slipping the foundation in. There's the screws, okay? And the foundation goes between the 2 screws. And then, right, you see the foundation comes down. It's actually slipping through the slot in the top bar because this frame is upside down, and I've got a space there. Okay, you want a gap of about 1 inch. Okay. Movie, Justin.
Hold on. This is probably going to be best if you narrate it, Landi. And I will post a link. If you want to watch this video after the meeting or while Landi narrates, you can do so. I just posted a link in the chat, and then I'm going to take presenter.
Movie, yay.
Yes, movie.
Okay.
You're not going to be able to hear audio though, Landi.
Ah, okay.
Yes. So tell us what, as the movie progresses. Oh, but I can.
All right. Okay, so I've got the jig there, and I have no idea what I'm saying because I haven't listened to this movie since I made it. But you can see here's my frame. I've cleaned it out, and oh, I guess that's the dirty frame. That's last year that I haven't cleaned out yet. Okay, so you do have to clean it, and there's the gizmo for cleaning it. That gets the wax out. I don't know why I'm going to clean it in my kitchen. I'm probably just going to talk about cleaning it in my kitchen because that would be a really big mess. That's something I usually do outside. Yeah, I'm not going to clean it in my kitchen on my kitchen counter.
No, you're just showing how to clean it.
I'm just showing the tool. Okay, there's one that I cleaned apparently, and it's all ready to go. All right. See, so we open that up a little bit, right? And the bottom doesn't have to be clean because the foundation isn't going to extend all the way down to the bottom. Okay, you can see the screws. those 2 sheetrock screws. Must be saying something about the screws. I'll have to remember that there's no audio on these for next time and review them. Okay, so you see, I put that there, and when you turn the frame, it opens up that slot. You can push it down, and now you've got a nice opening there where you can easily slip in the foundation. There's my sheet of thin surplus foundation. And hopefully it'll go right in nicely. Sometimes takes a little wiggling and jiggling to get it to go in, but that looked like it did it pretty well. And if you, oh, there's the dog. Okay, you get down, you can see that the foundation slipped all the way down through, and that you can see those screws on either side of it. And I'm going to just pull that up now. There we go. And I've got that sticking out the top. Okay, that should be it. Wonder
There
what
is.
I'm saying.
Well, I
Look like
I posted a link. This video is publicly available on YouTube, so feel free to go rewatch it as many times as you'd like.
So I can go and see what I'm saying. Okay, now I
Yes.
need the frame
I know.
advancer back again.
It's coming. There you go.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So now the next thing is you got to keep the foundation where you want it. All right, because it's not going to stay there. And the traditional way is to put a bead of melted beeswax along the junction of the foundation and the top bar. Okay, so the bottom of the top bar, you're gluing the foundation to the top bar. But that doesn't always work. In my experience, if you leave that super with the foundation in the back of your truck for even 15 minutes, half an hour on a hot day, the foundation will slip right out of the frames or it'll warp. So, you know the old saying about if something doesn't move and it's supposed to, you use, what's the stuff? You know, help me out here, somebody.
WD-40.
Thank you. WD-40. And if it does move and it's not supposed to, you use duct tape, right? So I'm a great believer in duct tape. And in this particular application, I like the heavy duty stuff, Gorilla Tape. Okay, so this works wonderfully for comb honey. And I know it's a little weird, but you take, Gorilla duct tape, the real powerful stuff, and just rip it down the middle lengthwise, which is actually very easy to do. And we're folding over this little 1/2 inch strip on the top. Okay, folding it over and pressing it down. It's got to be warm to do this, otherwise it'll break. You don't want it to break. You want it to just kind of gently fold over in, and you'll press it into the top bar. And then we're going to put this on top of it and staple it down. And that, plus a bead of beeswax, keeps that foundation in there beautifully. Much better than just the bead of beeswax. So, 4 or 5 frames, 4 or 5 staples per frame. And you want to make sure that you get both the wax and the duct tape and staple it to the top bar. And it won't come out. And this is a special tool that you have to buy in order to put that bead of wax on. There's a hole I've got my thumb over the hole in the tool here. I've melted some wax. You can see my little double boiler configuration there. You put the tool in, and the wax goes up into the copper part of the tool. Put your finger on the hole. It creates a vacuum. And then you just run that tool as you take your finger off and run the tool along this edge here. And you're putting a bead of wax between the foundation and the top bar. And that between that and the duct tape, you're good to go. So that's the mechanics of how you make the comb honey foundation. Super. Now I want to talk about how you get the bees to draw this out and make actual comb honey. First off, my comb honey supers, my boxes are all green. So everything else in my operation is some version of pink or blue. But the comb honey boxes are green, so I always know where they are. And the trick is to pick the right colony to put these on. You can just kind of wing it. You can produce comb honey without getting any fancier than what we've talked about right now. Or you can go another step, and I'm going to talk about the next step now. But remember, you're asking your bees to draw out, fill, and fully cap frames of foundation. It's got to be done quickly, or it'll be travel stained. There will be marks on it. It won't be quite as pretty. So you need very strong colonies. You have to give the colonies these super foundation right at the beginning of the strongest flows, and they can't swarm. If those bees swarm, you probably won't get any honey at all. You certainly won't get any comb honey. So this is not the hive you're going to pick. It's too strong. Its chances of swarming are really high. Okay, that's not the hive you're going to pick either, because it looks like it's kind of weak. It's got 3 boxes, but there's not a lot of bees out front. So it's actually, you want strong colonies, but not the strongest ones, not the ones that are almost certain to swarm. Or you can do swarm control techniques. So it can be tricky, to pick the right one. So let's talk about some management techniques for comb honey. And I have to say, is Joe Trimel with us tonight? Do we have Joe here? Because it's thanks to Joe that I learned about some of these. Is he here, Justin?
Joe is here.
Okay, cool. It's thanks to Joe that I learned about some of these things, because I guess a year ago, last Christmas, he gave me a book by Richard Taylor. And Richard Taylor is like Joe's favorite beekeeper of all time. He loves Richard Taylor, and we'd be working bees together, and Joe would be quoting Richard Taylor to me all the time. Richard Taylor says bees that are festooning are always queen right. Richard Taylor does this, Richard Taylor does that. So I've heard a lot about Richard Taylor, and finally, for Christmas, I got a gift of a book by Richard Taylor, and it's a book on comb honey production. And it introduced me to this technique I knew, but this one was brand new to me. I had never even heard about it in almost a quarter century of keeping bees. I've never heard about pagining, but this is one technique for producing comb honey, and it also is a technique for swarm control. So it has multiple uses. Okay. Swarms make wonderful comb honey producers. Why? Because swarms are primed for producing wax. They know these bees that leave the main hive know that they are going to have to create a new home, and their home is made of beeswax comb. So a really good, strong primary swarm, it's got to be primary swarm, not an after swarm. That's not strong enough. But a strong primary swarm can produce a really nice crop of comb honey. hive the swarm in a single box, a medium or a shallow, not a deep. Add a queen excluder and put some comb honey foundation on top, several boxes of comb honey foundation, and they will draw that out very happily. Once you pull off the comb honey, you've harvested it, you're going to need to probably feed the swarm and give them some extra boxes. But in the meantime, you know, they can produce over $1,000 worth of honey for you to sell. So, oh my God, what did I do?
Looks like you zoomed in.
Okay, thank you. God, if I didn't have Justin to keep me honest, I don't know where we'd be. There would, you know, I just, this is not my strong point here. So, crowding. Okay, historically and traditionally, when you read about producing comb honey, most of what you read will be crowd the bees down and go in every week and cut out all of the swarm cells. So that's like, good grief. Like that, when I first read about producing comb honey, I said to myself, I am never going to do that. No way am I going to go in there and cut out all swarm cells every 7 days, going through every single frame in the hive. But you don't actually have to. So there are ways of producing an artificial swarm. And here's one way, okay? After, it's always, you know, after the guy that invented it or discovered it. So Pageon was his name, and he lived over 100 years ago. I guess at this point, about 150 years ago. So the basics of this technique are, first, you pick a strong colony that's getting ready to swarm. So they have already started queen cells, a double deep or a triple medium, nice strong hive. You pick the whole hive up, okay? I mean, you don't have to do it, the whole thing. You can take it apart and reassemble it elsewhere, but you're moving the entire hive several feet to one side or another of the original location. Then in the original location, you set up a new bottom board, a single box of foundation, regular foundation, a queen excluder, your comb honey supers, and your covers. Okay, you put that where the original hive used to be. So what's going to happen? The foragers are going to go back to the original location, right? Then in the original hive, you find the queen. So you take the queen and the frame that she's on, and you put it in the new hive that's now in the original location, okay, below the excluder. And you have to make sure there are no queen cells on that frame. So the old hive, which has been moved, gets at least 2 good queen cells, and you destroy the rest to discourage after swarms. Or you can also give them a mated queen. But it's a great opportunity to make them think that they swarmed. And if you let them raise their own queen, they'll really think that they swarmed. So after a week, you move the hive that has the cells. So the original hive that you moved to the other side of the hive that's in the original location with the old queen. Okay? And what does that do? That means all of the foragers that hatched out after the first move are going to go back to the original location because their hive is now missing. It's on the other side. So what you're doing is you're beefing up the center hive with foragers that are confused because you moved their hive. And after you harvest your comb honey, you combine all the splits and get rid of the old queen, let the young queen take over. So I'm going to show you graphics on how to do this. Okay, so here's your original hive. Okay, there, you move it to the side. So in its place, you're putting a box of foundation. Now I'm going to find the queen. Here's the queen. There's the frame that she's on. I'm finding the queen and I'm putting that queen right here and filling this box out with foundation, putting a queen excluder and a couple of comb honey supers. Okay, here I'm just going to replace that, with foundation, and they're going to raise their own queen. Next, okay, here's the setup the way we left it in the previous slide. Now I'm taking this hive and moving it over here and giving it a regular honey super. So what have we done by doing this? We've moved this original hive twice, and just a word of caution before we discuss what it is that we've done. I thought this was a really cute cartoon. So as you're moving that hive, if you let them raise their own queen, make sure you keep track of the timing, because queen's wing buds develop on day 14 to 15. Okay. Just before she emerges. She'll emerge on day 16. But if you really jiggle that hive or that frame that the queen cell is on during that time period, you can get a queen that has no wings. So be very careful when you're moving that hive. So what have we accomplished? Okay, first thing we've done is we've artificially swarmed the bees because we took away their queen and we took away all their foragers. When we moved the hive for the first time, all the foragers left that hive and went back to the original location. We've provisioned the hive that has the old queen with all the original foragers, plus the ones that developed in the following week. Because when we moved the hive the second time, those foragers went to the original location. Okay. Third thing is, since the hive in the middle, okay, that got the old queen doesn't have any brood and they have no drawn comb, they have nothing to do but gather nectar and make beeswax. Comb honey, right? If you give them just a medium rather than a deep, that comb honey is all upstairs above the excluder. So that's the general principle. It's kind of like, when you're raising queens, there's a gizmo called a swarm box that you put you shake a whole bunch of very young nurse bees in there, and you give them several frames of pollen and some nectar and like a million nurse bees. And then you give them one frame with queen cells on it that you've grafted. So, and you lock them up. You don't let them fly. You lock them in. They have lots of ventilation, but you lock them in. They have nothing else to do but feed queens. So these guys here have nothing else to do but build wax. They have no brood to take care of. So they will, make a lot of comb honey. That's the whole concept behind pagining. You can, if you want, you can remove one frame in the bottom comb honey super. This is with any comb honey technique, and replace it with a frame of drawn wired comb. It's like a bait frame to lure the bees above the excluder. They do recommend that you use a queen excluder. That's not something I usually do, but for these techniques, it's probably smart. Okay, so here's a variation on the pagining technique. If you hatch a swarm and you know where it came from, okay, you can do this. You move the parent hive that swarmed to a different spot in the same apiary. You just take it away. And you set up a whole new hive stand with a single box of foundation, a queen excluder, and a bunch of comb honey supers on top. And you shake the swarm into that hive, okay, on the original location. So you've got all of the swarm who are primed to make wax, plus you've got all of the foragers. So that's an insane number of bees all ready to make wax. There's the swarm. There's the swarm, okay? And you move this, you take the parent hive and you move it somewhere else. And in the place of the parent hive, you set up, okay, a box of foundation, a queen excluder, and a bunch of comb honey supers. And you shake the swarm right in there. You can put the inner cover right, propped up against the hive stand, against the bottom board, and shake everybody in there. Make sure the queen goes in with everybody else. You actually want to kind of watch her go in if you can. So it gets all the foragers and has nothing to do but draw comb. Parent hive won't throw any after swarms because they've lost their foragers. And they'll raise a new queen and probably tear down the other cells. So it's actually great, it swarmed once and you don't lose any more bees after that first swarm. And you actually kept the swarm and put the swarm to work making comb honey. So shook swarming is another technique. And you probably have heard the term because it's used if you it's used at the discretion of the state apiarist in spring to save adult bees in a colony that has American foul brood. Okay, all frames of brood in such a colony have to be destroyed because it's extremely contagious. They've got to be burned. And the equipment either has to be burned or scorched. But the adult bees, if it's spring and there are good nectar flows and there's no danger of the colony being robbed, can be shook swarmed, okay, shaken onto foundation and allowed to draw out the comb using what's in their honey stomachs, in their proventriculuses. Maybe that's proventriculi, I'm not sure. And the spores of American foul brood will be bound up in the wax and not contagious if you do this. So you can't do it in fall. There has to be a flow on. But shook swarming is a way of creating an artificial swarm. So this is the original way of doing it, is that you do it before your hive swarms. So you're not guessing which one's going to swarm or if they've, which hive did swarm if you're, if you already have one that swarmed. So you got a nice strong colony, maybe one that has queen cells already, uncapped queen cells though. You take it off its stand and you set up in its place a shallow or a medium of foundation, bottom board, queen excluder, and comb honey supers above, okay? And then you shake half to a third of the bees from the original hive onto a sheet in front of the new hive. Again, you can use the inner cover as a ramp. So some beekeepers will put a queen excluder between the bottom board and the hive body, that single box, for a few days, because sometimes the colony that shook swarmed wants to abscond. You can take it away after 2 to 3 days because they probably won't leave after that time. As soon as they're invested in drawing out some comb, they're not going anywhere. Then you put the old hive behind the new one, facing in the opposite direction, and let them raise their own queen or requeen them. Once the honey is pulled, you can combine the colonies. So here's a diagram of shook swarming. Okay, so this is the front view. Here's our parent hive. It's got queen cells. And we're going to take the parent hive and move it behind the original hive stand, facing the other way. And in its place, we're putting one single box of foundation with a queen excluder above it and the comb honey supers above that, and below another queen excluder. Maybe. You don't have to, but that kind of guarantees that they won't decide to go somewhere else. And you're shaking most of the bees into this new box at the original location. And of course, all the foragers are going to come back here too. So after shook swarming, this is the side view. Okay, so here's the original box, the original hive, the original location. This is actually the original hive, but this is the new one that you set up in the original location. Forgive me, it can be kind of confusing. It's behind it. You can see the entrance is facing the other way. Here's the original entrance. This one's facing the other way. And after you've harvested all of this comb honey, you can combine these guys and keep the young queen. Oh, I got through it. So special thanks to Joe Trimel for giving me that book for Christmas, the new comb honey book. You can see that I made good use of it. A lot of interesting information in that book, Richard Taylor. Okay. That's it. A lot of material in there. We got questions?
Andy, I'm going to put a link in the chat to one of, to I think the video that you saw, Home Honey by, oh, his name is slipping from me now, from Vermont.
Oh, Mike Palmer.
Yep. Yeah. He has a few videos on comb honey that are up, and they're very
really good. Yeah, they're excellent. They're really, really good videos. I learned a lot from watching those. I really enjoy making comb honey. It's a lot of fun. And some of these techniques work for swarm control as well. So, they do double duty. Adriana says she can't wait to do it. It is a lot, some of the techniques are kind of complicated. You really have to understand what the bees are doing, how they're working to try some of this stuff, but it's just so much fun. You need to give them wax foundation to start, or can you give them an empty frame? No, you really want to give them foundation. That's pretty emphatically, that is emphasized in Taylor's book. Don't give them drawn comb, give them foundation. Can you use a swarm that you didn't know where it comes from? If it's a big swarm, yeah. The trick is you want to use a primary swarm, not an after swarm. It's got to be a big, good sized swarm. There are special split pins which may be purchased and used to help hold the foundation in place. Yeah, Joe, but those are for extracted honey. You don't want those in your comb honey. Imagine you've got a customer who bites into the comb, and you don't want to cut it out because that'll destroy like two of your sections. So I wouldn't use those, not for comb honey. Did you say put the swarm in one medium? Yes, a medium or a shallow. Hey, Justin, help me out with these questions. I'm having trouble reading them because the type is so small on my computer.
You can make the type larger.
How can I do that?
If you press Control, and while you're holding it, the plus button, it'll make the whole page larger.
The what button?
Control and plus.
Control.
Oh, you're on a Mac, aren't you?
Yes, of course I'm on a Mac.
What's the but? What is it on a Mac? I remember.
What's the use? What's the name of the tool? Oh, WD-40. Hi, Joe.
The command button and then the plus symbol. So hold command and then the plus button.
Okay. So
for the tool, I was wondering, the one that you have to push the button and you said it's a special equipment to bead the wax.
Oh, that tool for putting the wax bead
Yeah.
on? I don't know what it's called, Yvonne. It's but it'll be described as just that. It's like a copper, it's about 8 inches long maybe, and it's got a copper tube on one end and a wooden handle, and it's specifically for doing this. I'd have to look in a beekeeping catalog and see if I could find it.
Okay.
The equipment catalogs, yeah, you'll find it. It didn't, that didn't work, Justin. Command on them, yeah.
Hold
Put the thin surplus under the cleat of the other kind of frame. Anyway, you could just give them a frame with no foundation at all. Okay, just empty space to build out. Sandra, they'll build it in crazy comb. That's the problem. You know, you need the foundation because you want that comb to be in the frame. If it's not in the frame, you're not going to get those beautiful, 4 sections of wax. It's going to be, it'll be however they want to build it, and it's not going to, trust me, it won't be the way you want it to be built.
You know, Landi, I'll bring it up. I have a photo of someone who tried to do something similar, and they put frames in without multiple frames, without any foundation, and they got some of the most fascinating looking comb.
I'll bet. But not comb that you're going to put in containers for comb honey, I'm guessing.
No, but it is a
honey,
good
maybe.
It's a good visualization for why you don't put frames without foundation next to each other.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Okay. This is the comb is going.
Yeah,
sideways,
you see how the comb is going all throughout here sideways?
All over the place, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just not going to work.
That was real interesting. Oh, those are your bees.
Those are my those are my bees right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good picture. And that's all brood comb too.
Yep.
Okay, let's see. Sounds like you can also use the comb honey technique with a package of bees installed in the location where a strong hive was located. Just relocate the strong hive. That's actually a pretty good idea. You could probably do that. I think that would be worth a shot. I'm not sure if a package is quite strong enough, but maybe. You can use a frame with just a thin piece of foundation across the top bar. You could try that too. But it, if you want a sure thing, get the thin surplus foundation and the frames with the slotted top bar and just put it in. It's really, once you've done it, it's not that big of a deal. and you will consistently get really nice comb honey. Okay. Are we good? We got any more questions?
Anybody
Did I
else?
did I miss any questions, Justin?
I don't. Well, you want to try zooming in again? Hold the command button and then tap the plus button.
Okay, the plus button is, I have to shift to get to the plus button.
No, just tap it. Don't shift.
It's not plus. It's equal with.
Yep. Don't worry about it.
Command. Like that.
Yep. Is that making the page larger for you?
It doesn't make the type any. It doesn't make the font any bigger.
On my side, it does.
It's making the. It just makes it. I don't know. It doesn't seem to help.
Worth a shot.
Anyway.
Hey, anything else?
Good.
I think so too. Beginner meeting on Thursday, 7 p.m.
All right, guys. Thank you all.
Thank you, Landi.
Good night.